Millionaire gives everything to a homeless woman, only to discover she's his long-lost daughter. The wind howled through the empty streets of downtown, but Lucas Marshall didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the homeless woman sitting by the cold iron lamppost, cradling two small bundled-up children. She was a vision of despair, hair tangled, clothes ragged. But there was something in the way she sat, so still, so resigned, that made Lucas pause. He had seen 1,000 faces like hers in his years of wealth, each one a reminder of a life he had long since abandoned for the polished world of penthouses and luxury cars. He was used to being untouchable, both by the world and by his emotions. But there was something about her, something unsettling. "Is this what I've become?" he asked himself, though no one was around to hear. The question was too loud in his head. Lucas wasn't a man for charity or second chances. He preferred control, numbers, strategy, the things that built his empire. Yet here he was, standing in front of a woman who needed nothing from him, but was about to change his life forever. One casual offer, one simple gesture, and the woman's quiet smile in return would be enough to send Lucas spiraling into a world he never thought he'd be part of again. One that would uncover the darkest, most hidden parts of his own past. Lucas Marshall had everything a man could want. At 35, he was the CEO of a global conglomerate controlling billions, living in a penthouse apartment that kissed the sky, and wearing suits worth more than most people's annual salaries. His life was a carefully constructed masterpiece, a world where he never had to confront his past or deal with anything less than perfect. He had built his empire on cold, calculated decisions, never once faltering, never once second-guessing. He trusted few and even less when it came to emotions. They were a luxury he couldn't afford, especially after what had happened years ago. At a young age, Lucas had been torn between two worlds. His family had come from humble beginnings, his father a mechanic, his mother a teacher. But the fire for success had been sparked early, and Lucas quickly moved away from the world of poverty, desperate to climb. He cut ties with those who reminded him of his roots, including a younger sister, Ava. It was a decision he would regret every day since. But regret wasn't a luxury he allowed himself. Now he lived for business, for money, for control. Yet, on this cold autumn evening, something was about to crack through the carefully built walls of his life. As Lucas passed the woman and her children, he couldn't help but glance down at them again. The woman's eyes met his, and for the briefest of moments there was something there, something familiar. It wasn't just the weariness or the bitterness of a life spent surviving. There was a softness, a look of recognition. The thought caught Lucas off guard. It wasn't possible. "Excuse me," Lucas said, as his curiosity got the best of him. His tone was businesslike, casual, as though he were speaking to a partner, not a homeless stranger. You seem familiar. Have we met before?" The woman hesitated, her eyes narrowing. Her face was weathered by years of hardship, but beneath the grime, Lucas saw something that stopped him in his tracks. A flicker of recognition, almost as if she knew him. "I don't think so," she replied, her voice low and gravelly, but there was a hint of uncertainty. "I'm just passing through." But Lucas didn't believe it. He was a man who prided himself on remembering faces, on knowing people. Something about her gaze made him feel like he was missing a piece of the puzzle. Without thinking, he pulled out his wallet and handed her a $100 bill. "Take this. Get yourself and your kids something warm," he said, already turning to leave. He didn't want to linger. He had business to attend to, after all. But as he walked away, the woman's voice stopped him dead in his tracks. "Thank you," she said softly, almost hesitantly. "You don't know how much this means." "Dad." The word stung, cutting through Lucas's chest like a knife. He froze. Dad. That word echoed in his ears, crashing against the steel walls of his world. It couldn't be. The word hung in the air like an unanswered question. "Dad!" Lucas stood there, frozen, his heart racing. He didn't turn back, but the echo of that single word reverberated through his entire being. He had to keep walking. He had to move forward. But his legs felt like they were made of stone. His hand gripped the $100 bill in his pocket, suddenly feeling like a symbol of everything he wasn't. His life was built on control, on certainty. He had worked his entire life to become someone who never had to answer to anyone. And yet, here he was, questioning everything. For the rest of the night, Lucas couldn't shake the thought of the woman. His mind churned with possibilities. Could it really be? Could she be the daughter he had lost years ago? The daughter he had abandoned in his desperate pursuit of success? The memory came flooding back, sharper than he had expected. Ava, his sister, had once begged him to stay close to his family. She had pleaded with him to keep in touch, to not let his ambition tear them apart. But Lucas had been too focused, too driven. He had cut ties, believing that success was the only thing that mattered. He had let go of everything, his family, his past, even the love of his life. And now, as he sat in his penthouse later that night, sipping a glass of scotch, the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The woman on the street, the homeless mother, had the same eyes as his sister. Same shape, same sadness. The same desperation. Could it really be his daughter? Lucas tried to convince himself it wasn't possible. He had never been told about a child. He didn't even know if Ava had ever had kids. Yet, something deep within him tugged at the possibility. He needed answers. He needed to know. The next day, Lucas couldn't focus on work. He canceled meetings, ignored phone calls, and spent hours going through old photographs, trying to piece together the fragments of his past. He found an old family album, one he hadn't touched in years, and flipped through the pages. There, in a picture from his early 20s, was a woman, young, vibrant, and smiling. It was Ava. But next to her was a little girl. She was too young to be his daughter. She was too small, too innocent. But the resemblance was undeniable. His mind raced. Had Ava kept something from him? Had she given up a child in the years he had cut her off? Or could it be that the woman he had seen on the streets was not just some random stranger, but his flesh and blood? Unable to quell the storm of questions, Lucas decided to return to the street the next evening. He had to find her. He had to know if she was really his daughter. The second he stepped onto the street, his eyes scanned the crowd. There she was, sitting against the same lamppost, holding the same two children. This time her face was unreadable. She didn't acknowledge his presence. Lucas approached cautiously. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. The woman looked up at him, and her eyes held no warmth, only wariness. She seemed reluctant to engage, but she didn't turn away. "You came back," she said flatly. "What for?" Lucas stood in front of her, feeling the weight of his next words. I think you're my daughter. I don't know how, but something about you, it's too familiar." The woman's eyes narrowed, the flicker of recognition growing more intense. But she didn't say anything. She just stared at him, as if weighing his words. "Please," Lucas said, his voice faltering for the first time in years. "I know I've been a terrible person. I've spent my life running from the past, but I need to know the truth. Are you really my daughter?" For a long moment, the woman said nothing. Her eyes flicked down to her children, and Lucas could see the pain, the years of struggle etched on her face. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't know who you are, but I'm not who you think I am." Her words hit Lucas like a slap to the face. He couldn't believe it. She wasn't his daughter? The disappointment was overwhelming. He had invested so much hope in this fleeting moment, in the idea that his past might somehow be redeemed. But she wasn't his daughter. And yet, the question still burned in his mind. If she wasn't his daughter, who was she? Why had she looked at him like that? "I'm sorry," the woman said, standing up. She tucked the children close to her. I thought I might have known you, but I was wrong." Lucas watched as she walked away, his heart sinking with every step. There was so much more to this story than he could understand, and he knew deep down that he wasn't going to walk away from it easily. The mystery of the woman and the haunting familiarity of her eyes was something he couldn't ignore. And little did he know this encounter would set into motion a chain of events that would unravel the darkest secrets of his life, forcing him to confront everything he had run away from. The days that followed were a blur for Lucas. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman on the street, her face, her words, and most of all, her eyes. It wasn't possible, he told himself over and over. He had no children. His past was far behind him, buried under a mountain of success. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Lucas found himself retracing his steps, revisiting the street corner where he had met her. Every night he went back, hoping to see her again, hoping for an answer that would make sense of the confusion. But each time she was gone. Then, one fateful night, as the bitter wind blew through the city streets, Lucas found her again. She was sitting in the same spot, except this time she wasn't alone. A man stood next to her, his presence commanding, his posture stiff. The man was dressed in a dark coat, his face shadowed under a wide-brimmed hat. He spoke to the woman in hushed tones, his voice too low for Lucas to hear. But there was something in the way they interacted, something guarded, something unsettling. Lucas's curiosity got the better of him. He stepped closer, his heart pounding, his mind racing with questions. What was going on? Who was this man? Was he another part of the woman's past? Or was there something deeper at play? Without thinking, Lucas approached them. "Excuse me," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm looking for someone. A woman with 2 children. She was here the other night." The man's head snapped around, his eyes narrowing as he sized up Lucas. But it was the woman's reaction that caught him off guard. She froze, her face pale, her lips trembling. "Who are you?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. But there was fear in her eyes, fear that Lucas had never seen before. I need to know something," Lucas stammered, his thoughts swirling. "I think you're my daughter. I just want to understand." The man stepped forward, his body tense as if ready to protect her from any harm. "You need to leave," he said in a low, threatening tone. "Now." But Lucas didn't back down. "Please," he urged, his voice desperate. "Just tell me the truth. I don't know who else to turn to. You look like someone I once knew. I don't even know if I have a daughter, but I can't shake the feeling that—" "Enough!" The woman's voice rang out sharp and forceful. She stood up, her hands trembling. "You have no right to be here. You have no right to ask me anything." Lucas took a step back, his mind spinning. This wasn't just about a woman and her children anymore. There was something else at play here, a mystery that ran deeper than he could have imagined. "I know I've made mistakes," Lucas said, his voice breaking as he tried to explain. "I know I've hurt people, especially my family. But if there's even a chance that I've left someone behind, if I've missed something, I need to know." The woman's eyes softened for a moment, but then her face hardened again. "You don't get it, do you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not your daughter. I'm not anyone's daughter." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The woman hesitated, her gaze flickering to the man beside her. Then finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Claire, and I'm the daughter of someone you destroyed." The words hit Lucas like a freight train. Destroyed? How could he have destroyed someone he never even knew? Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. My mother, your sister Ava, died giving birth to me. She was too young, too scared. She didn't know how to survive, and she didn't know how to ask you for help. She was ashamed. She had no one left to turn to, and you abandoned her when she needed you the most. Lucas stood there, paralyzed. The truth was a sharp knife twisting in his chest. Ava, his sister, had died. He had no idea. No idea she had even been pregnant, let alone that she had died alone, giving birth to a child she could never protect. And now, Claire continued, her voice cracking, I'm left to live on the streets, alone with these kids, because of you, because of your choices. And you think you can just waltz back in and fix things? You can't fix this. Lucas could feel the weight of her words, crushing the remnants of his pride. This wasn't just about redemption anymore. This was about facing the truth, about confronting the damage he had caused. It was a price far higher than anything he had ever paid in business. As Claire's words sunk in, Lucas realized the extent of his own failure. He had been too caught up in his own life to notice the suffering of the people who mattered most. His family, his sister. And now, Claire, his niece, was here, standing in front of him, a living testament to everything he had neglected. His empire, his wealth, everything he had built meant nothing in this moment. He could feel the tears welling up in his eyes, and for the first time in years, Lucas didn't care. I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice breaking. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. I promise. But Claire, despite the raw pain in her eyes, shook her head. I don't need your promises. I don't need your money. I need you to understand that you can't undo the past. But maybe you can start making things right for those who are still here. And with that, she turned away, leading her children down the street, leaving Lucas standing alone in the cold, his heart shattered into pieces. The next few weeks were a blur of reflection for Lucas. He couldn't escape the image of Claire's face, the pain in her eyes, the anger in her voice. It haunted him every time he closed his eyes. He had spent so many years building his empire, surrounding himself with wealth and prestige, but none of it could fill the emptiness inside him now. Each morning, Lucas would stand in front of his grand penthouse window, looking out at the city below. But the lights of the city no longer held the same allure. The world he had spent so much time perfecting seemed insignificant in the face of the truth he had just learned. Days passed, and Lucas struggled to find a way to make things right, but nothing seemed to be enough. He thought about Claire's words. I don't need your promises. I don't need your money. She was right. What good was money when it couldn't undo the past? But as the days turned into weeks, Lucas found himself changing. He couldn't forget Claire's face or the hurt in her voice, and he realized that redemption wasn't just about fixing the broken pieces of his past. It was about changing himself, making sure he didn't continue the same patterns that had led him to this point. He needed to do more than just apologize. One evening, as the sun began to set, Lucas walked to the same street corner where he had first seen Claire. He had spent countless hours there, but this time was different. He was determined to do more than just seek forgiveness. He had a plan. As he approached, he saw Claire and the children sitting on a bench. The air was cold and the sky was darkening, but there was a softness to her expression that made his heart ache. He stood there for a moment, gathering the courage to speak. Claire, he said, his voice tentative but firm. I've thought a lot about what you said, and I want you to know that I'm not just here to apologize. I'm here to help you, to make sure that you and your children never have to go through what you've been through. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I want to give you something better. Claire looked at him, her eyes wary but curious. What could you possibly give me? She asked, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. Lucas took a deep breath. "I've arranged for you to have a safe place to live. A home for you and the kids where you can start over. No strings attached. I want you to have everything you deserve, Claire." She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words, but then something in her expression softened. "Why? After all this time, why now?" "Because I've been living a lie," Lucas said, his voice cracking. "And now I want to make things right, not just for you, but for me too. I owe it to you. I owe it to my sister. And I owe it to myself." There was a long silence between them. Finally, Claire spoke again, her voice quiet but steady. "I don't know if I can trust you, Lucas, but I'll think about it. For the kids, if nothing else." Lucas nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could change. That maybe the journey to redemption wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. Over the following months, Lucas kept his word. He helped Claire find a home, made sure she and her children were safe, and even offered support to help her rebuild her life. But he also knew that true redemption couldn't be bought or given through gestures. It was something that had to be earned. Lucas spent the next year reconnecting with his family, seeking to make amends with other estranged relatives, and becoming more involved in charitable work. He started to volunteer at homeless shelters, working alongside people like Claire and learning firsthand about the struggles they faced. It wasn't easy. The road to redemption never is. But with every step, Lucas felt himself change, and with each small act of kindness, he could feel the weight of his past slowly lifting. As the years passed, Lucas continued his efforts to rebuild relationships with those he had wronged. He never gave up on Claire and her children, and while their relationship remained cautious, they slowly began to trust him again. For the first time in his life, Lucas understood that wealth and success weren't enough to fill the emptiness inside him. The only thing that could do that was love, and the courage to face the painful truths about himself. One evening, as Lucas sat in his office looking out over the city skyline, he received a call. It was Claire. "I've thought about everything," she said, her voice hesitant but filled with warmth. "And I want you to know, I appreciate everything you've done. I'm willing to try to forgive you." A tear slid down Lucas's cheek as he wiped it away. It wasn't just forgiveness that Claire was offering him, it was a second chance. A chance to finally be the person he had always wanted to be. "I'll keep proving myself," Lucas whispered, "I promise." And as he ended the call, Lucas looked out at the city below, feeling the weight of his past and the hope of his future settling deep within his chest. As Lucas sits in his penthouse, staring out at the city he once ruled, he realizes that no amount of wealth can replace the value of human connection, love, and redemption. But how much is enough? Is it truly possible to change after a lifetime of mistakes? Lucas's journey was one of self-discovery, regret, and ultimately transformation. He began as a man blinded by pride and greed, but through his actions, he learned the value of family, compassion, and second chances. Now we turn to you. If you were in Lucas's position, would you have been able to change after everything you've done? Or do you believe some things are unforgivable? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have given up your empire for the chance at redemption?